wind didn't carry welcome. It came low across the sagebrush like a warning, rustling skirts, tugging at hat brims, hissing through the warped boards of the station platform like it knew something no one dared speak. Clara Mercy Hale stepped off the last train car, one boot down, then the other, slow as someone measuring the weight of her presence. Dust swirled around her hem in angry coils, clinging to her worn traveling dress like a second skin. The hollow of her throat shimmered with sweat, though the sun had only just begun its climb. She'd been called many names in her life: spinster, burden, shadow, and once, mother, but never bride. Certainly not here, not in Blackstone Hollow. A dry-eyed station master glanced up, tipped his hat without warmth, then returned to tallying freight. A few townsfolk lingered under the porch, awning wives with arms folded like verdicts, children wide-eyed behind their skirts, and a wiry man spitting tobacco into the dirt as if to mark her place. No one came forward. She reached into the side pocket of her satchel and touched the worn leather of the small case within. Her fingers found the edge of the locket, its hinges still stubborn after all these years. She didn't open it. Didn't need to. The memory of what was inside burned cleaner than any fire. She had not come for a husband. She had come for a reckoning. Behind her, the other three women descended. Lillian in a cherry print bonnet, nervous fingers clasped at her waist. Rose, taller and sharper of jaw, stepped like she was entering a theater. And Hannah, the youngest, gripped her little Bible like it might hold a key to the land. But all eyes were on Clara, the one who wasn't supposed to be here. The Boone brothers were easy to spot. Elias stood apart from the others, tall and built like a railway tie, broad in the shoulders, smoke dark in the eyes. The others, Caleb, Amos, and Seth, clustered in confusion and rising disappointment, eyes flicking toward the sisters, then locking on Clara with disbelief that soured into offense. "She's too old," someone muttered. No one claimed the words, but they hung there all the same, like the scent of blood after a butcher's spill. Clara said nothing. Words were wasted on dust, and men who couldn't see past a face lined by time. She adjusted the satchel on her shoulder and stepped off the platform, her boots thudding against the planks like declarations. A memory surfaced as she walked thick pine walls, the cry of a baby, her father's silence broken only by the snap of a carriage door. Her arms still remembered the weight of that child. Her ears still heard the thunder of retreating hooves. Wyoming wind couldn't scour it clean. She passed Elias Boone. His gaze didn't flinch, didn't welcome either, just a quiet, long look that searched and withheld. Then he turned to Caleb and said low, "They'll need a place to stay." "Not her," Caleb spat. But Elias didn't answer. He just turned and walked back toward the forge, the metal in his gait matching the hammer's echo she'd heard in her sleep these past 3 nights. The sisters were led to the Boone homestead by Seth, who grumbled the entire ride about mail-order mistakes and womanly baggage. Clara walked. No one offered her a horse. It was nearly midday when she arrived. The ranch house stood plain and hard against the ridge, pine logs gray with wind, a sagging porch, and a woodpile stacked with precision. Chickens scattered at her steps. A mongrel dog barked once, then retreated under the water trough. No greeting. She made her bed on the floor of the tack shed that night, atop a rolled tarp and under a saddle blanket. She didn't cry. Clara Mercy Hale hadn't shed tears since the night she left St. Louis with nothing but a broken name and a ghost in her belly. She unpacked slowly. Dried herbs wrapped in muslin, a small iron pan, 2 hand-stitched pouches of coins, and last, the locket. She opened it under lantern light and stared at the tiny lock of dark hair curled inside. Still there, still hers. In the quiet, the forge hammer rang out again. Measured, steady, unforgiving. She listened until her heart slowed, until the wind changed direction, and then she whispered, not as prayer, but as promise. "They don't have to want me. I didn't come for their wanting." The west didn't answer, but neither did it deny her, and far beyond the ridge, a lone coyote cried once, then fell silent, like it too was waiting to see what Clara Mercy Hale would do next. The tin cup on the forge shelf was the first thing Clara noticed. Bent at the rim, blackened by heat, it sat there like someone had meant to toss it and forgot. Elias Boone didn't speak when she stepped into the lean-to behind the blacksmith shop. He didn't look at her either, just wiped sweat from his brow with a square of linen and plunged a length of iron back into the fire. The glow lit the hollows of his face, deep lines carved not by age alone but by all the years that hadn't let him rest. Clara stood in the doorway, her hands clasped tight before her. Behind her, the dust rolled off the dry hills like smoke. It clung to her skirts, her hair, the back of her throat. She'd scrubbed her palms raw at the pump that morning, but the earth in Wyoming seemed to get into your bones quicker than water could wash it out. You want something? Elias asked finally without turning. I'll work for my keep, she answered. His hand paused just a second on the tongs. The iron hissed. I didn't say you wouldn't. They said little else. He showed her the cot behind the shop, hard pine slats with an old buffalo hide for a mattress. There was a wash basin, a shelf with half a candle, and a lantern that took coaxing to light. That was it. But it was a roof, and it was hers. The ranch house had no place for her. Seth made that clear enough with the way he closed the front door behind him when she approached the stoop. This ain't a boarding school, he'd muttered, loud enough to be heard, not loud enough to be answered. Elias hadn't defended her, but he hadn't shut the door either. That, Clara had learned, meant more in a place like this. She spent the next days fixing things quiet, unnoticed repairs, a drawer that stuck, a loose hinge on the coupe. She found a child's boot behind the tool shed and stitched the leather back to shape with a scrap of her own thread. No one asked her to, and no one thanked her. But the work filled the hours, and sometimes that was enough. In the forge, Elias worked as the sun climbed and fell, hammer ringing, sparks flying like fireflies out of season. He didn't talk, but Clara watched the way he moved, the patience in his rhythm, the weight behind each swing. It wasn't anger he poured into the steel, it was something quieter, something like sorrow with edges. One afternoon, she brought him a tin of willow bark tea. He didn't look up, just said, "Don't drink that swill." She set it beside him anyway and left. That night, the tin was empty. The nights got colder. Clara wrapped herself in a patchwork quilt one of her sisters had handed her at the station. She sat under the moonlight outside the shed and stitched torn saddle straps back together. Her fingers bled in places, but the act soothed her. Needle in, pull through, again and again. Her mother used to say mending was a kind of prayer. Clara didn't pray anymore, but she still stitched. Some evenings, the wind shifted and carried faint laughter from the house, young, high-pitched. Her sisters making jokes, practicing piano chords on the broken upright the Boones had abandoned years back. Rose's voice always carried furthest, teasing, flirtatious. Clara smiled once, then let it fade. That world was theirs. Hers was the quiet one between the hammer strikes. In town, the stares got colder. At the mercantile, the shopkeeper's wife asked if Clara was the girl's mother. She didn't answer. At the church, no one offered her a place on the pew, so she stood at the back until she didn't come again. Only once did anyone ask her why she'd come. It was the widow Harper, who caught her alone behind the feed store, collecting wild yarrow. "You're not like your sisters," she'd said. "No," Clara replied. "They look forward. You carry something old with you." Clara didn't respond. "Some folks," the widow continued, "come here to build. Others come to bury." That night, Clara dreamt again of the cry, the baby's cry, the one she hadn't heard in over 20 years, but that still echoed behind her eyes when sleep took her too deep. She saw the locket then, in the hand of a man she couldn't remember clearly, and a door, slamming. She woke before dawn, fingers wrapped around the satchel she'd tucked under her cot. In the forge, Elias was already working. He nodded, once, and handed her a cracked tin box. "Found some of your thread in the hayloft," he said. She took it. Their hands touched, just slightly, and neither pulled away first. The air smelled like iron and sage that morning, sharp, honest. Later that day, a boy rode into town on a mule with one shoe missing. He was limping, blood on his palm, holding back tears. No one moved, until Clara stepped out from the forge with a strip of willow bark and an old cloth, sat him down on a stump, and cleaned the wound with such gentleness the boy stopped crying before the second knot was tied. The townsfolk watched from porches and storefronts. No one said a word, but one woman, just one, left a small jar of lard on Clara's stoop the next morning. No name, no note. Only the wind knew who it came from, and Clara, folding the linen over her lap, stared out past the hills and thought not for the first time that a storm wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came soft, and it stayed. The dog started barking before sunrise, one sharp yelp, then another, closer this time, until the forge door creaked open and Elias stepped out barefoot, shirtless, shotgun in hand. His eyes scanned the dark ridgeline beyond the stables, but whatever had stirred the mutt was already gone, just wind and the scent of something wild on the air. He didn't go back to sleep, neither did Clara. She had been awake anyway, sleepless from a dream that left her heart pounding and her mouth dry. The same one, always the same. A wooden crib, a man's boots retreating down the hallway, and the snap of a latch that echoed like thunder through a childless house. Clara sat on the edge of her cot, feet on the dirt floor, staring at the faint glow of morning beginning to stain the edge of the sky. She poured water from the basin, splashed it across her face, and braided her hair back like she used to when days still had structure and names. Outside, the light came slow, the kind of light that stretched thin over land too tired to welcome it. Dust settled in the bones of everything here, on fence rails, on saddle horns, in the creases beneath your eyes. The wind whistled low and dry, whispering stories no one wanted to remember. Clara stepped into the forge yard with a hammer tucked in her apron. Elias didn't look up. He was already working iron into a flat blade, the heat rising off the coals in soft waves. Sparks spat up as he turned the piece, and the air smelled like ash and sweat and old rust. "You sleep?" he asked without looking. "Number." "Me neither." That was all. She cleared the workbench and began oiling the tools without being told. The forge had become an understanding between them, words unnecessary, tasks shared by rhythm. He struck, she tempered, he cooled. She filed. Time passed in the kind of silence that wasn't hollow, but full of labor. It wasn't until midday that the boy came riding again, same mule, this time both shoes missing. He was holding his side, blood soaking through a tear in his shirt. Elias dropped the hammer before the echo even faded, and was at the gate in 4 strides. "Barbed wire," the boy gasped. "Fence snapped near the dry creek. Mule spooked. I fell." Clara had already cleared a crate and boiled water before Elias could tell her to. She didn't ask for permission. She just took the boy's arm and helped him down, gentle but firm, like a woman who'd done this too many times not to know how. She cut the shirt with a hot blade, cleaned the wound with water steeped in yarrow and goldenrod, and stitched it closed with horsehair she'd soaked herself. The boy never cried, not once, not even when she tied the last knot. When he left, he tipped his hat to her, not the way children mimic adults, but the way men honor something they don't yet have the words for. Elias said nothing, but that night, he brought her a tin of tea he didn't bother pretending was for himself. Clara tucked it on her shelf beside the locket. The next morning, a note was nailed to the church door. No name signed, but the message was clear. "Widow woman at Boone's forge takes in blood and secrets. Beware your sons and daughters." The handwriting was sharp, jagged like a voice that had never softened. Rose tore it down before breakfast, but the damage had already traveled further than any paper could. At the mercantile, the shopkeeper wouldn't meet Clara's eyes. A loaf of bread that cost 10 cents last week now cost 12. A mother tugged her daughter across the street to avoid passing her. Clara didn't argue. She didn't flinch. But that night, after supper, as she sat under the starlight darning her only decent dress, she paused with the needle half-threaded and asked Elias, quietly, without looking up, "Do you believe everything they say about me?" The wind shifted. "No," he said. "You don't even know what they say. I know what truth feels like." They didn't speak again. But when Clara rose to head inside, she found a horseshoe laid near her door, newly made, still warm from the forge. She picked it up with both hands, held it like it meant something. And for the first time in years, she thought maybe it did. Beyond the hills, the coyotes howled again, this time not alone. The mule was dead. It lay stiff beside the fence post, just east of the dry creek bed, eyes wide open to the sky, legs bent under like it had folded without a fight. Elias Boone found it first, swearing low under his breath, the kind of wordless fury that rose from dust and failure. He looked toward the hills, then down at the snapped wire curled like a snake across the trail. "Damn thing wandered out past the range again," he muttered, kicking a clump of sagebrush. "Stupid boy never learned to tie a gate." Clara heard the news from Hannah, who came breathless up the trail with her boots half-buttoned and her bonnet flapping like laundry. "They're saying the mule was poisoned," she whispered. "Some say it's curses, some say it's you." Clara didn't answer, just turned back to the basin where she was steeping lavender and comfrey, the scent of crushed leaves rising warm and thick. The forge door was open. Elias hunched over a wagon axle, sweat trailing down his spine in crooked lines. The hammer sang steady, like a clock that didn't believe in time. By sundown, 3 more people had stopped by the ranch, not to visit, not to buy, just to linger, watching. One leaned against the fence like it was casual. Another pretended to fix a strap on her boy's shoe while her eyes tracked every movement Clara made. The last didn't even hide it, just rode by twice, slow, horse-stamping dust like judgment. The Hale sisters tried to laugh it off. Rose mocked the town women's corsets, Lillian made biscuits with extra molasses, and Hannah strung up a line of drying herbs along the porch like a holiday banner. But none of them left the lanterns unlit that night. Clara mended a torn saddlebag by the firelight inside her lean-to, needle catching just enough glow to find the holes. The locket sat beside her on the crate, open, as if breathing. She didn't look at it, not directly, but every stitch she made seemed drawn toward it, like thread unraveling toward the past. Across the yard, a sudden clang, Elias dropping a tool. A sharp breath, not pain, something else. She rose, crossed the dark yard barefoot, and stepped into the forge where the coals still smoldered. Elias was seated on the bench, staring into the embers. "You all right?" she asked. He didn't look up, just said, "He was my brother's mule." She sat down beside him, close enough to feel the heat on her skin. "I know." A long pause, longer than most. "Folks always need something to blame," he said. "I've carried that weight before," Clara answered. Elias leaned forward, hands dangling between his knees, the firelight catching the scars on his knuckles. "My mother used to say when the well goes dry, blame the woman who draws water." They didn't speak again for a while, but before Clara stood to leave, he reached behind the bench and handed her a package wrapped in oilcloth. "What is it?" she asked. "Something I fixed." She opened it back in her shed. Inside, a leather strap stitched and polished, the same one from the satchel she carried, the one torn by time and too many miles. She hadn't asked. She hadn't even noticed he'd seen it. She sat for a long time, holding it like memory. In the days that followed, the whispers turned to sharp words. The widow at the schoolhouse warned the children not to speak to Clara. A jar of salve left for the shopkeeper's ailing boy was returned unopened. At the watering trough, two ranch hands made a joke about hexes and hags, just loud enough for her to hear. Clara didn't rise to it, didn't change her pace, her silence, her way. But one evening, she found a dead crow nailed to the post outside her lean-to. No note, no name, just the bird. She pulled it free without a sound, wrapped it in a cloth, and buried it beyond the fence where the cottonwoods leaned toward the sky like tired men. That night she didn't light her lantern. Instead, she sat in the dark, watching the forge across the yard, where Elias worked long after midnight. Sparks rose like fireflies, and in that flickering glow, the world felt quiet, almost kind. She didn't cry, but she whispered to the dark like it might be listening. "I know what you took from me. I just don't know yet who you gave it to." Then she closed the locket and turned it face down, and somewhere in the black stillness beyond the shed, the coyotes had gone quiet, too quiet. The trader wore a coat too fine for this town. That was the first thing Clara noticed, slick dark wool with brass buttons dulled by wind and whiskey. He leaned against the rail outside the saloon like he owned the dust beneath his boots, grinning at the passers-by with teeth too white and eyes too eager. "Name's Breck," someone whispered near her ear as she passed, basket in hand. "Rolls in twice a year, always smells like tobacco and trouble." Clara kept walking, but her stomach turned cold. There was something in the way the man's gaze caught hers. Not the usual look the kind man gave women past their bloom as if they were ghosts or burdens. This look lingered, dug deep, like he knew something, like he remembered something. And just before she turned the corner, he tapped the side of his vest and gave her a nod, casual, slow, and she saw it. A brass chain, dangling from his pocket, connected to a small, flat object no bigger than a thumb. A locket. She didn't go straight back to the forge. Instead, she sat on the church steps long after the doors had been locked for the evening. Wind whistled through the alley, lifting her skirt hem, brushing grit into her hair. She didn't feel it. Her hands gripped her own satchel tighter, as if the worn leather could keep her from slipping back into a memory. 23 years gone, but not forgotten. Not when the shape of that locket still burned against her palm every night. Not when the man who held it just tipped his hat like it was some joke she wasn't in on. The barn dance came 3 nights later. No one invited her, of course. The sisters begged her to come anyway. Rose had tied a ribbon in her hair. Lillian wore a dress Clara had helped stitch. Hannah had baked apple hand pies and beamed with the kind of joy only the young still believed wouldn't rot. So Clara went. She didn't dance, didn't drink, just stood near the corner post where the lanterns didn't quite reach, her hands wrapped around a cup of cider gone lukewarm. The floorboards groaned with the weight of boots and laughter. The fiddle sang wild and fast. Then Breck walked in. The air shifted, like when a fire burns low and all you smell is smoke. He spotted her right off, moved through the crowd without a care for the elbows or the glares. Clara didn't move, not even when he stopped in front of her, 2 feet away, and said, "Funny thing, memory. Sometimes it comes back all at once." She stared at him, her voice caught in her chest like a splinter. "Where'd you get it?" He grinned. Which thing? She didn't blink. The locket. He reached into his vest and pulled it out, letting it dangle. Same etching, same size, different chain. Traded a man for it. Long time ago. Said it belonged to a woman who cried too quiet to keep. She reached for it, slow, but he pulled it back. Now, you don't want to cause a scene, not with so many eyes watching. Across the room, Elias Boone saw the moment. His mouth tightened. He set down his tin cup and walked, deliberate and silent, toward the post. But Clara raised her hand, just slightly. Stopped him cold. Her voice was low even. What do you want? Breck chuckled. Want? Nothing. Just came to see if you were still breathing. Then he leaned close, breath sour with whiskey. But maybe, I'll let you buy it back. Clara's jaw clenched. Her hand itched to slap him, to claw at the chain, to scream. Instead, she reached into her dress pocket, pulled out a small bundle of coins wrapped in cloth, her savings from mending, from salves sold to travelers. Take it, she said. He did. Tossed her the locket like it meant nothing. It hit the ground once before she caught it, knees in the dirt. By the time she looked up, he was gone. Elias was still there, silent, watching. He bent, picked up the cloth she'd dropped, pressed it into her palm. You all right? He asked. She nodded. He didn't believe her, but he didn't ask again. They left the barn together, wordless. The moon hung low behind the pines, casting long shadows across the trail like ropes. Every sound felt louder, gravel underfoot, owl hoots, the far-off crack of a branch. At the forge, Elias lit a lamp, then turned to her and said, You can tell me, or not. She stood in the doorway, the locket warm in her hand. Her voice came slow. My father made me give him up, said no one would want a woman ruined. Elias didn't flinch. She looked at him. That man tonight, he knew who took my child, might have even sold him. Silence. Then Elias said, What's done can't be undone, but you don't have to carry it alone anymore. She didn't cry. She couldn't, but when he reached over and pressed something into her hand, a small iron pendant, shaped like a flame, fresh from the forge, she closed her fingers around it like it was a lifeline. Outside, the coyotes had gone quiet again, but this time it wasn't fear that kept them silent. It was the scent of something long buried finally turning in the earth. The wind brought smoke at dawn, wood smoke, dry and bitter, not from a fire gone wrong, but from a hearth finally lit after too many cold seasons. Clara smelled it before she stepped outside. She stood on the stoop of the forge shed, quilt wrapped tight around her shoulders, watching the curl of gray rise from the Boone homestead chimney. It hadn't burned in months, not like that. Elias stood across the yard, sharpening a blade against the wet stone. His sleeves were rolled, hat low. He didn't look up when she joined him, just said, Cold fronts moving in. She nodded. Storm's coming. Neither said more. There was nothing else to add. The storm wasn't just in the clouds. It was in town. The day after the barn dance, after the trader vanished with coin and locket in hand, the gossip turned heavy. Folks didn't just whisper anymore. They watched, turned away, locked their windows when she passed, as if shame might be catching. Clara felt the judgment crawl over her skin like a fever. But Elias stayed. He didn't ask more than he already knew. He didn't offer comfort in words or gesture. He just kept showing up. Late that afternoon, the town gathered for Sunday supper behind the chapel tables laid with bread, stew, dried apples. The sisters were asked to bring their biscuits. Clara wasn't asked at all. But she came anyway, iron pendant around her neck, plain and unshined. She carried a jar of calendula salve, left it beside the cloth napkins without a word. The conversations hushed as she approached. Children were pulled closer. The widow Harper crossed herself like Clara had death riding on her shoulders. Then Elias stepped beside her, didn't say anything, didn't touch her, just stood there, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the preacher as if daring him to try and move them along. Minutes passed. Then a man from the back, a boy's father, Clara, had once stitched up with willow bark, and silence cleared his throat. She healed my boy when Doc Hemley wouldn't come, didn't ask a thing in return. No one answered. Then another voice, soft, trembling. She brought my daughter fever tea last winter, thought the girl'd die. Still no one moved. But Elias did. He stepped up to the head table, reached into the small pouch on his belt, and pulled something out. A pendant, not iron this time, but silver-plated, forged in the shape of a rising flame, edges blackened with soot, strung on a leather cord. He turned to the crowd. She ain't here to be pitied, or forgiven. His voice was steady, quiet. She's here because none of us have the right to cast stones. He didn't hand her the pendant. He placed it on the table, then walked away. Clara didn't cry. She stood there until the sun dipped behind the chapel steeple, until her shadow disappeared into the earth, until the chill in her spine settled into something that felt like peace. That night, she wore the new pendant under her collar, not to show it, just to know it was there. Later, while boiling willow bark in her kettle, she found herself humming, just low, just once, a tune she couldn't remember learning. In the quiet, she heard boots on the path, not heavy like Elias, not quick like her sisters, slower, hesitant. She stepped outside. A girl stood at the gate, barefoot, holding her wrist, red with rash, eyes wide with apology. "My mama says I shouldn't, but," she mumbled. "You help folks, right?" Clara nodded. The girl didn't move, so Clara opened the gate. Didn't say come in, didn't have to. Some things, when done right, don't need to be spoken. And far off, past the trees, thunder rolled low like a warning or a promise left unanswered. A child's cough echoed through the canyon before the sun did. Sharp, dry, carried by the wind across the Boone ranch and down to the old Ford shed. Clara heard it before she opened her eyes, same as she could feel a storm long before the rain ever touched earth. There was sickness in that sound, not croup, not fever, something deeper, something hungry. By the time she stepped out into the dawn, shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, a woman stood at the fence, gray bonnet, tired eyes. Hands clutched around a small bundle her boy, maybe 5, swaddled in a threadbare quilt that smelled of panic and smoke. Clara didn't ask the woman's name, just took the boy into her arms and carried him inside. The forge had been quiet for 3 days now. Elias was down by the lower pasture, mending a gate blown crooked by the wind. The ranch had started taking in the unwanted animals too old for work, a farmhand who drank too much to be trusted with a rifle, a girl from town who wouldn't speak after her father disappeared in the flood 2 springs back. Clara had built her own bench out front, sawed it herself, smooth pine, cured with beeswax and fire ash. There, she taught mothers how to wrap poultices, how to steep thyme for throat ache, how to grind slippery elm into salve. Children came with scraped knees, torn sleeves, splinters the size of toothpicks. Some came for the candy sticks Rose handed out. Others just came to sit near her shadow. The town never said sorry. But it came, piece by piece. The preacher's wife sent 2 candles wrapped in linen. An old rancher brought a bag of dried beans. One night, someone left a copper brooch with a chipped blue stone at her doorstep. No note, no name, just gratitude worn smooth by time. Still, not all hearts softened. There were those who passed her with flat eyes and stiff backs. And every so often, she'd hear a whisper behind her when she stepped into the mercantile or walked past the schoolhouse ruined woman. Witch blood, burden. She let it settle, let it pass. But she never forgot. And when the nights grew colder, and the children began calling the place Mercy's Yard, she stitched a new curtain for the shed window and let the fire burn long into morning. Elias brought her books, dog-eared pages about medicine, anatomy, soil, and seed. He never handed them directly, just left them on the crate by the door, spine up, like offerings. She read them slowly, in silence, by lamplight, learned words she'd never been given before. Abscess, poultice, anemia. But she already knew their meaning. She'd lived them. One evening, she found him outside hammering a fence post, deeper into the frost-hardened dirt. She walked up with a kettle wrapped in a rag, still warm. "I steeped the bone set longer this time," she said. He nodded, wiped his hands. "Storm's comin'." She looked out over the ridge. Gray clouds hung low, dragging their bellies across the tops of bare cottonwoods. "Let it come," she said. Later that week, she caught Rose weeping behind the tool shed, a letter clutched in her hand, a name crossed out, a promise broken. Clara didn't press her, just sat beside her and waited. "You think we'll ever be just women again?" Rose asked through her fingers. Clara didn't answer right away. "Maybe we were never allowed to be," she said finally. "Maybe we have to choose it, every day." That night, Clara walked the pasture line, checking the fence as the wind kicked up harder. She moved slow, lantern swinging, boots crunching over frostbitten grass. Halfway down the ridge, she saw a figure in the dark. Man, thin frame, hat low. He turned as she approached, hands in his coat pockets, watching her the way wolves do from the tree line, half curious, half remembering something they'd rather not. She stopped short. Her lantern flickered. He didn't speak, just tipped his hat and stepped back into the trees. Gone. She stood there a long time. The storm broke at dawn, a hard snow sweeping in from the north. Inside the forge shed, the boy's fever broke too. Clara sat by the cot, fingers curled around a cup of willow tea gone cold. She stared at the pendant on the shelf, the one shaped like a flame, and thought, for the first time in many years, that maybe fire didn't always have to destroy. Sometimes it stayed, sometimes it warmed, sometimes it warned, and sometimes it waited. The box was left without a sound. No knock, no voice, no footprints in the snow, just the shape of it there, square, unmarked, dry, despite the melting drifts around it, as if it had been waiting long before dawn found the door. Clara spotted it before she stepped out. The frost was thick on the window, but something in her spine already knew. That knowing the kind that settles in a woman after enough winters, enough silence, enough years of not asking questions she didn't want answered. She didn't open it right away. The stove inside hissed faintly, the iron crackling against heat. She brewed bitterroot tea with a slow hand, watching the light creep up over the far hills. Elias wasn't back yet. He'd ridden out to check the fence line near Dry Gulch before sunrise. Said he'd be gone an hour. That was 2 ago. When the tea was gone and the house was still quiet, she knelt beside the box and peeled it open. Inside was the locket. Her locket. Not the one she'd traded for. Not the imitation with the mismatched chain. This one still had the nick on its edge, where it had caught on the bed frame the night she packed to run. The clasp worked smooth from years of fidgeting. She opened it. The lock of hair was still there, dark as ash, curled like it had never known wind or time. But it wasn't alone. There was a slip of paper folded 4 times, thin as regret. She unfolded it. No signature. Just 5 words, written in a hand she didn't know. He asks about you often. That was all. Clara sat on the stoop with the locket in her palm, letting the cold burn her skin. The snow crunched in the distance, hoofbeats maybe, or just her heart pretending it still knew how to hope. She didn't cry, but her breath hitched once, hard, like something had finally loosened that had been bound too long beneath the ribs. By midday, the sky broke open with blue. The wind slowed. The children returned to Mercy's yard with split knuckles and burnt fingers and colds that wouldn't quit. She bandaged, brewed, scolded, praised. Life, same as it ever was. That evening, Elias found her in the garden bed, turning soil with a broken hoe. He crouched beside her and nodded at the locket strung around her neck again, glinting dull in the fire-colored light. That the real one? Clara nodded once. Came back this morning. Elias didn't ask more. He just reached into his coat and handed her a folded square of muslin. Inside, seeds, chamomile, sage, flax, poppy, all sorted, all labeled in his careful hand. Thought maybe come spring, he said. She took them without a word, just held the pouch, felt the weight of what it meant. Not promise, not salvation, but something like beginning. The forge burned low that night. No hammer rang, no smoke coiled high, just the soft crackle of coals and the slow breath of 2 people learning to exist beside each other in the same silence. When she lay down, Clara placed the locket on the shelf above her cot, beside the iron pendant, beside the seeds. She didn't touch the letter again. Didn't need to, because sometimes the West gave nothing back. And sometimes, without warning, it returned everything you thought the wind had carried away, just enough to keep you going, never enough to stop the ache, but still, enough.